again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Lilia able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Bring it, the fans want one. Score! On the board! Paul Kariya!
And we are back with another edition of the Forever Mighty podcast on a, what is it, Wednesday night? Thursday morning, technically, for some of us.
That's not our fault, man.
But we get to talk about a Ducks win. And we went into this game, I think after Monday, I was listening to Pat and Jay do the podcast after the Ducks lost their second straight 4-1 loss to the Kings. And I was like, we're going to have nothing to talk about. And then Zegras gets called back up for this game. Simon Benoit makes his NHL debut. And this was the most chaotic game I think we've had all season. Just the sheer chaos in some of these goals that we're going to get to in a little bit. But John Gibson coming out thinking he could score himself a power play goal. Sam Carrick crashing the net, taking out Cal Peterson, scoring a goal. Sam Steele scoring a goal with his stick. Cam Fowler walking the defenseman and scoring with just over a minute to go. It's not a bad game. It's an exciting one.
Yeah, no, that was fun. That was, it started off a little weird, where Anaheim had a little bit more of the puck in the beginning, but it didn't feel like they were doing much with it, and so you're like, whatever. And then, you to end up going into the third 2-2. It ended up being a lot of fun. We got to see some good goals. Got dramatic with Cam scoring with a minute left, I think.
Yeah, minute 07 or something.
Yeah, so it ended up really delivering. I was actually really surprised and happy with how that game went. That's a nice game to end the year on.
Yeah. Anyway, we do end the year on because they're going to lose the next 6, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you have that one. You're like, oh yeah, look, that's what it's like to win a hockey game. All right, now let's go win a draft lottery.
Yeah, we're all waiting for June 2nd's draft lottery now. That's kind of the next big step for the rest of this season. The last 6 games with the next 2 against the Kings, they are what they are. But Ducks were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs today with the Blues beating the Minnesota Wild in regulation. So we knew it was bound to happen. We knew this 3 or 4 months ago that this was going to be the case. Now it's just officially official that the Ducks aren't making the playoffs this year. So this game, like we said, we knew it was going to happen, but it was a bit of a relief here that it's over. It's officially over. You don't have to worry about it anymore. There's no stress. Now it's just, okay, we can just kind of enjoy watching these last 6 games. And you go into this one with probably the most exciting line we've seen all year, with Trevor Zegras centering Maxime Comtois and Troy Terry. That's something I think a lot of us have been waiting for, and obviously for Trevor Zegras to get called back up and finally play center, as late as it is in the season, I think this is the most excitement you could possibly ask for heading into a game.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. We had talked about this a little bit. I think when he was first sent down and all that kind of stuff, but it's kind of fun, that he came up to his first NHL game in, what'll hopefully be the position he plays in Anaheim for the next 15 years or whatever, as a center. But then the other thing is, it was an away game, but there were allowed to be fans in the building, and it was Byfield's first game. So I just think that's such a cool kind of confluence of events. Like you were saying, going into the game, the lineup's exciting. You definitely get the kind of release of tension, like you talked about, from knowing that mathematically they're eliminated, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. And then it just happens to be this game where, what I think everybody in California to some degree hopes will be 2 of the 15 to 20 best players of hockey for the next 15 years. It's really exciting. And so I do think, then to win this game and to have Cam make a great move like that at the end, and, win win the 3-2 game like that at the end of the year with, like you said, 6 to go, in which we could lose all of them going out equally. So I just think it was a nice little high note to hit as the year wraps up.
Yeah, you get a nice mix of what the future of this rivalry is going to look like with Byfield and Zegras and Drysdale and Adrian Kempe and Gabe Vilardi, and then obviously with Getzlaf and Kopitar and Doughty and Cam Fowler still being a part of these teams. It's kind of a nice mix of the old guard and then the new guys coming in. I mean, you look at the Kings' goals in this game, they get one from Gabe Vilardi. It was his first in like 24 games. You know, a guy that they drafted 11th overall, a guy that they still have high hopes for, and then obviously their second overall pick in Quinton Byfield making his debut. Trevor Zegras' return. Jamie Drysdale continues to look like he's 25 already, playing just as a 19-year-old in this league. And you look at all the other young guys in the Ducks lineup tonight. You get like a little bit of a taste of what this is going to be, 4 or 5 years down the road when Trevor Zegras is playing at his best and Jamie Drysdale is playing at his best. And obviously the Kings have a lot more guys on the way, guys like Alex Turcotte and Arthur Kaliev and a bunch of other guys they have in their system. But the Ducks still have a few guys that like Perreault and Grew and Tracy that will eventually make their way to the NHL that will be a part of this. But we got to quickly hit the lineups for this game. As I mentioned, Zegras with Comtois and Terry. That was my favorite line by far of all year. They were the best line, I think, on the ice for the Ducks tonight. Trevor Zegras led the way, I think, with like a 71.5% expected goals for percentage. I know they were getting kind of heavily favored in the offensive zone, but that's what you want, right, from those guys. And it's one game, but it bodes well for the future. And it's so funny. You look at that line, and then you go to what the Ducks listed as their second line, which was Delorier, Grant, and Ryan Getzlaf playing on the right wing of this de facto second line. And then you've got Jones, Steele, and Sam Carrick playing on the right wing of a fourth line. And then Lindstrom back now with Volkov and Raquel. It's kind of just a mixed bag of random roster assignments. Like, I like Lindstrom, Volkov, and Raquel. I like Terry, Zegras, and Comtois. The other two was just kind of a mishmash of who was left.
Yeah, I think they were kind of weird. I was thinking about the Getzlaf on the wing thing, and I think I saw something online that there might be some stuff that recently come out about this as far as like why they decided to do it. But I was wondering if part of it is maybe having him on the wing makes it easier to move him around in the lineup if you need him. You can just kind of play him wherever, and he's going to kind of just play his game mostly. He's not really going to be doing a lot different. Like, I think tonight I saw him like noticeably in on the forecheck more than we've seen him in a long time. But I don't think his game is going to be all that different. So I was wondering about that. But I think, like you said, the rest of it's a little bit of a mixed bag, and it's hard to know what it's going to look like going forward and stuff like that. But that first line is something I know we had talked about as wanting to see, and it makes a ton of sense. And if that becomes a viable first line, I think that takes a lot of pressure off of some of these other guys, and now you've got guys like Jones and Lundestrom and Steele who maybe can exceed expectations and step into a high-end middle six role or something like that. And then you've got some of these guys like Perreault and Colangelo, which if they become legitimate goal scorers and you're using them to bolster second or third lines, I think that's huge. So I think that first line is something I would like to see kind of hold up for the rest of the year, because I think on paper it just makes too much sense.
Yeah, I mean, they probably should have had a goal in this game, and Zegras was working the power play like we've seen from him all year. Probably should have had a point in this one. You feel like if they stay together, it's bound to come. And this is the first game that we saw, I guess, the future of the Ducks franchise at center, all three of them playing in the lineup at center, with Zegras, Lindstrom, and Steele all playing down the middle. Obviously, Derek Grant was still part of that, because you still got to throw him down the middle of the ice. But yeah, it's the first look we get at what is potentially, the 1-2-3 punch down the middle for the Ducks. Obviously, if they go out and draft a center like Matty Beniers in this year, or right, Shane Wright next year, that will change. But it is the first time that we're seeing that. And then obviously Simon Benoit making his NHL debut just has an amazing story to his game and how he got to the NHL. But if you listen to the broadcast, I think if you had a drink every time they mentioned the fact that he was 6'3" or that Quinton Byfield was 6'5", you'd probably be pretty hammered by the end of the night, because I think I heard it about 10 times that Simon Benoit was 6'3". Like, this guy has an amazing story. Undrafted, signed a PTO with the Gulls, signed an AHL deal. Finally, an NHL ELC, now makes his NHL debut, and all the broadcast mentions is the fact that he's 6'3", 195 pounds.
It's bad, man. I like, as much as I can be guilty of that kind of stuff too at times, just because, I guess it's stupid though. Like, it's stupid when you say it out loud and you think about it, but you're like, true, right? It's like, I think it was Rachel Dory made the point of, like, you have to write your prospect evaluations without mentioning their handedness or their size. And it's like, yeah, like, it's just, those are just have become such ridiculously significant identifiers in what we kind of expect of players, that it ends up pigeonholing guys. And to see someone like Byfield, who has that size but also has that speed and that skill, is just, it's very exciting. And for Simon Benoit, it's funny that he's 6'3" and he ended up being undrafted. You think that alone would get him drafted? There's guys who are clearly not as good as him who get drafted because they're 6'4". So
yeah, and I'm guilty of that with Byfield too. But because, like, he's such a freak coming out of his draft year, that he was like 6'4", 210 when he was drafted as a 17-year-old. So it's ridiculous, but it's just funny. It's bound to happen. But it wasn't the greatest of debuts for Benoit, but he still looks solid. Like, he didn't make any obvious errors. I think he played around 14-15 minutes tonight, was playing with Kevin Shattenkirk. They kind of gave him a lot of 5-on-5 time. I'm not sure if he logged that many minutes on the penalty kill or the power play. I'd have to double check, but pretty tame, calm debut from him. I'm not sure if he gets in for the next game, or if this is kind of just, we're going to hand you your debut and we'll see what happens going forward, because it's not like the Ducks have a ton of injuries on defense. I mean, they took Andy Welinski out of the lineup to put Benoit in, so it's not like you're taking out a regular, an NHL regular out of the lineup to play him. But when you look at the guys who are down there, the fact that Benoit got a debut before Cody Curran is interesting. The fact that Josh Mahura is still down there, and this is nothing against Benoit. He's played great. He had a great week in San Diego, but it does kind of make you wonder, is this just a look just to give him a look, or is he going to play the rest of the season, especially with all those guys down there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing to say is they did get somewhat of a look at Mahura this year, right? Mahura played, like 11 or 12 games? So in whatever degree that they're trying people out, I think you can at least go, you got 10 games. Like, we have at least a decent idea of what that is at 10 games. I do think it's interesting that they brought up Benoit before they brought up Curran. Just kind of given, like you said, what Benoit's story is and being undrafted, and then Curran, who was the MVP as a defenseman of the Swedish League last year. So I just think that's interesting. But, they waited a little while to bring Hakanpää up as well. So I don't know that anything can be read into it too much. It might just be Anaheim, by and large, giving European defensemen a chance to play on the smaller ice at a lower level and a lower expectation than having to step right into it at the NHL level. So, but he looked okay. I don't know that Shattenkirk's the easiest guy to play with. Like, I think tonight, more than anything for me, Shattenkirk looked like a forward. And I don't know that if it's your first game as a defenseman in the NHL, that's necessarily the easiest partnership to walk into. But he didn't do anything that made me question why he was in the lineup. So
yeah, Jay Southern brings up a pretty decent point on why he might have got his debut tonight, is that he's a bigger, heavier hitting guy, and we know how the Ducks love to kind of slot those guys into the lineup. Welinski, they've utilized him more as kind of a shot volume offensive defenseman, even though it's not really his skill set, but that's more of what he's known for. Then you bring Benoit in, I guess, for what they expected to be a physical battle. It was surprisingly not as physical as we're used to seeing in a Ducks King rivalry, but it's changed a lot. And you look at that first period and the fact there was only 10 face-offs in the beginning frame, and we went through that first period in a pretty quick amount of time. It's clear that the game and the style of play of both these teams is changing, which bodes well for the future of this rivalry. When we look, I mean, there's always going to be a physical and a nastiness kind of aspect to this rivalry, but when you look at the young players coming up, like, it's going to be a fun one to watch once both of these teams get back to being competitive teams in the Western Conference. Like, it's going to be a nasty one, but it's going to be full of a lot of skill and a lot of speed.
Yeah, it should be a blast. I think, and like you said, there were guys that we didn't even see in the lineup tonight that are going to be a part of that going forward. There's a lot to be excited about for the future. I think, like you said, the lack of physicality tonight kind of showed. It's really surprising, I think, just because we do know that the Kings are still kind of trying to fight for that playoff spot. But Anaheim, they literally have nothing. Like, this isn't even a year where they can just play for quote unquote, like, just finish out respectfully or whatever, or respectably. But
just finish above the Sabres, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. So at this point, I don't know. It's just kind of whatever.
This team's missing? Phil Kessel.
Shit, dude. But no, I just think, they don't have a lot of energy right now, and I think it's hard for them to kind of muster that up because there isn't anything, to play for. There's really not any pride on the line. Like, you are what you are at this point. You're one of the 3 worst teams in the league, so.
Yeah, but we before we get to more of our post-game stuff, we have to talk about the Kings' second goal, Adrian Kempe's goal. More so not the goal itself, but John Gibson on that play. We've seen Gibby a few times, especially in the last couple of weeks, where it just looks like he's, I don't want to say given up, but he's just, he just doesn't care anymore in some of these plays. I mean, it's easy to say that with how bad the Ducks are and how he's kind of left hung out to dry a lot of the times, but I don't know what he was thinking on that play. Like, Cam had a good 2 or 3 feet on Kempe, and he just kind of slowed down. He was going to take the puck and probably circle behind the net or whatever and play it out, and all of a sudden Gibson flies out of the net to try and play the puck. They end up kind of colliding a bit, and Kempe ends up putting it in the back of the net. Obviously, it doesn't hurt the Ducks at the end of the day, and even if they lost because of that goal, it wouldn't really matter too much, but it just feels like Gibby is just out of it. He's checked out for the rest of the year.
Dude, I have to be completely honest with you that, like, that exact situation as it developed and having the defenseman coming back being Cam, like, that perfectly happened in a way that, like, I was looking at that and I was like, God damn it, Cam. And all I was thinking about was blaming it on Cam and not on Gibson. And, like, yeah, he shouldn't have been out there, but it does bother me that Cam didn't pick up his head and, like, look at him. But at the end of the day, you're on the power play, and you have the advantage. So just let your guys come back, take it behind the net, and break out again. Like, it was reckless, and although it didn't cost the team in the end, I do think it was a very high risk, low reward proposition. I'm not sure that there was a significant advantage. It's not like one of those things where you can see a breakout pass developing and they're just going for it. Like, this didn't feel like that. This just felt like him making a decision to just come out. And, okay, fine, but this is what happens.
Yeah, like we've seen him do that before, like you said, where he's tried to come out and play quickly and catch, them on a bad change and a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-2 to kind of push the power play forward. I mean, maybe that's what his thought process was there. Clearly, Cam had no idea what was going on in that play, but it just kind of sums up the Ducks season and the season for Gibson on that play. With only 7 games remaining and some of the shit that he's been through this year, that we've started to see him kind of unhinge a little bit over the last little bit, where he's just kind of made these plays where you're like, what are you doing, man? Like, we need to get you into the off season and just let you have a little bit of a break here, because he's been put through it this year for sure. Like, it's gotta be tough. I can only imagine where, a couple seasons ago, we're talking about John Gibson being in the Vezina discussion because he's just carried this team or kept them afloat. And then now the last 2 seasons specifically for him have just been so bad. And it's not even really his fault. It's just the team in front of him has been, one of the bottom 3 teams in the league over the last 2 years. Like, it's impossible to be a netminder as good as you are. You could plug any, top netminder in the league on this team and they're going to struggle. And it's going to be tough. Like, if anybody's been through it over the last 2 seasons, it's John Gibson. He's at the top of that list.
Yeah, he's been the Ducks' best player for 3 years in a row, and it's really, unfortunate that right when he really kind of found his groove at the beginning of, what would that be, the 18-19 season? Yeah. The team, that was right when the rest of the roster fell apart on him, and the roster hasn't been able to recover in front of him, and he's kind of suffered from them. But, I just think it's been a really rough stretch, and I do think there is a degree to which so much of us, like a lot of us, have just kind of decided to just let everything go with him. Like, he can do no wrong. Like, there's no reason to be mad at him because he's been put in an impossible situation for the last, 3 years. So
yeah, he needs a break. He needs it to. I mean, he can't go on vacation because we're in the middle of a pandemic, but he needs some home time to just put this season behind him and hope for better things next year. But we'll talk about Sam Steele's goal here because this is, as everybody like to point out, the first goal he scored with his stick in a long time, but it was a good one. I mean, he had a lot of time to pick the corner, but you got to give him credit. He did it, and he sniped the top corner on Cal Peterson. It's nice to see Sam Steele get a normal goal and one that showcases his ability on the offensive side of the game, especially coming off of the discussion that Pat and Jay talked about on Monday's show, where Dallas Eakins was saying he wants him to be more of a matchup checking center that can shut down the opposition. It's nice to see him get back to what I guess he was labeled as a prospect of being not really a sniper, but more of an offensive-minded player, a guy who puts the puck in the back of the net or setting up his teammates, and we know he has that ability. It's just now finding the consistency that's going to get him to being, a potential 40 or 50-point player. Not to say this is, going to kickstart that for the last 6 games of the season, but when we look at the progress of Terry and Jones and, Zegras and Drysdale coming in this year, and really everybody else is kind of taking a step forward. Comtois, of course. Sam Steele's the only one who's taken a step back, and he's only got a handful of games to really not prove that he's turned it around, but at least end the season on a high note. So this is a good start to doing that. I think he had a goal in the last game against Vegas, and now so he's got 2 goals in his last 3 games. A nice end to the season here would be a nice finish for Sam Steele.
Yeah, I don't know if it happened for anybody else, but I'm pretty sure, like on the Kings broadcast that I was watching, he paused so hard before shooting that the camera moved forward, just assuming he was going to rip it right away, and had to pull back. And I think that for me was incredibly telling, was how patient he was, and he did grab it and wait, and he didn't, right. It's funny, I think, sometimes where you talk about guys either rushing to get shots off or overthinking it and waiting too long, and it's always situational, and I think this was a perfect example of him having the situational awareness to know to give himself a second for the play to develop in front of him, and he just makes a great shot. And like you said, he did come in with a little bit of offensive hype. And so to see flashes of this level of play is nice. The question will be, is it going to be more consistent, or is it just going to be flashes? Is this something he's going to do 5 or 6 times a year, and the rest of them are just going to be, maybe 3 or 4 ugly goals? Or is this something that, you're looking at a guy who can potentially score 15 even strength goals a year? So
yeah, I mean, even if they're ugly goals, so if he's putting the puck in the back of the net or getting on the score sheet, it still counts, right? Like, how many pretty goals has Maxime Comtois scored this year? A lot of them are tap-ins at the back post or being in the right position. So, it's nice to see him wire it, but as long as he's scoring, that's all that matters.
I think that's fair, but I do also think that, like, you can look at the way that they play, and if Sam Steele changes his game and becomes a fundamentally like drive straight line player the way Maxime Comtois is, then that's a different conversation. But at this point, he doesn't seem to be that guy. He seems to be a player who is going through a slump and is doing the simple things to try to get that going. But I think the play that we saw tonight is much more indicative of, if he clicks, at a 15 to 20 goal level, what you are going to see. It's going to be things like this. It's going to be him making plays. It's going to be him being a second option on a good line. And so I think with Maxime Comtois, you can see that those goals are with intention, as opposed to those goals with Sam Steele are just, he was, you know what I mean? Like, it's not this, it's just like a skate to the front of the net, you're the first guy in, whatever. And I do think that's a little bit different. So I would say next year next year will be telling, because if he scores, 5 or 6 goals like that again next year or something like that, then yeah, maybe it is a thing where that's the way he's playing now. But I'm not counting on his ugly goals as being a sign of much.
Yeah, I mean,
as far as his future production. Sorry.
No, at the very least, like, it's a better goal scoring season for Sam Steele this year. I think that goes under the radar a bit. He had 6 goals and 16 assists in 65 games last year. He's got 6 goals and 6 assists in 38 games this year. It's not quite up to the same point where he had 6 goals in 22 games in his rookie season. If he scores one more by the end of this season, so in the final 6 games, it'll be a career high for him. I mean, 7 isn't anything to write home about, but it's not a lost season, I think. I've made it out to be a lost season, but I don't think it's as detrimental as I think we're making out to be at sometimes.
I think that's fair, right? But I think the question is what are you looking at for this year, right? Because if he was 25 and this team was contending, then yeah, you take the points however you get them, and you deal with that in the offseason. But this is a team at the bottom of the standings who we are looking at as which guys are going to be part of this future. And so I do think that while it is good for him to be able to have those little milestones to point to, especially given how much he has struggled at times this year, I do think from an outside perspective, what we are looking at more is a little bit more of the process than the results. And is that process repeatable? Is this a thing that we're going to be able to rely on going forward? And if so, that's great. And if not, well, then he's still got the goal and good for him. But I think that's just one of those, the way I'm looking at it thing. Because you're 100% right. It's nice for him to get the goals. It's nice to get the win. Like, I'm not dismissing any of that.
Yeah, I think the thing that's always going to go against Sam Steele, unfortunately, it's fairly similar to the Nick Ritchie situation, is all the hype that was built up before he made it to the NHL. Because, like, if we sat here and said, if Sam Steele became Adam Henrique, are you disappointed? I think it'd be a 50-50 split. I think most people would say, probably not, like, that would be pretty good. And some people would say, yeah, it is disappointing based off what they thought he could be. And I think even if you took the same question and asked it about Isaac Lindstrom, I think the percentage would be a lot higher, saying, yeah, that would be amazing if Isaac Lindstrom turned into Adam Henrique. But Isaac Lindstrom was drafted higher than Sam Steele was. He was drafted a few spots in front of Sam Steele. Sam Steele was drafted, I think, 30th overall, and Isaac Lindstrom was drafted, late 20s. They were roughly 28. They're roughly around the same spot, but it's that 131 point junior season that Sam Steele had where he won CHL Player of the Year and all the hype got built up.
Was that his draft year?
His D+1 year.
His D+1?
So right after his draft year. So it's almost the worst year to have that type of boon in production. Like, he had 70 points in 72 games in his draft year, then had 131 in 66 games with 50 goals in his D+1 year. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that he was snubbed for the World Juniors. He stayed on a Regina team that was stacked with a lot of the rest of the top WHL players going and playing for Canada in the World Junior Championship. There's a lot of things that went into what was just an exceptional year for him. But that's always going to be a detriment to, when we're evaluating his potential and where he is in his game right now. Because I think he should be kind of analyzed the same as Isaac Lindstrom in terms of where they could end up, but he'll always be thought of as a guy who could have done more just based off the hype that was built up around him. But him becoming Adam Henrique is amazing. If he becomes that for the Ducks as a late first-round pick to become, a potential 20-goal, 40, 50-point center in this league who's reliable in their own zone, that would be a huge win. I mean, that would be great for the Ducks to have a guy like that in his prime to go along with Zegras and Perreault and Drysdale and Comtois and Terry and all those other guys.
Yeah, he is a victim of expectation. He's a victim of circumstance, and he had that, like you said, he had that one great 131-point year, and he's kind of the opposite of Tracy, right? Braden Tracy popped the year before he was drafted, or going into the draft, and then the next year he struggled. And so already as fans, we've kind of, moderated our expectations, and you've heard it from some of the people who write and talk about prospects as far as, well, maybe this isn't, this is someone that we were hoping would kind of be farther along right now. And so now we have to wonder, is it just a slow development or whatever? Sam Steele is someone that everybody was just kind of sitting on and waiting because he was going to, I would say we talked ourselves into believing that he could be the guy that could keep the window open, as opposed to Lundestrom, who was a guy that was taken at the end of the first round who could turn into an NHL player, but might not because he's a little undersized and there's question about his offense and all that stuff. I think you're dead on that in a lot of ways they are similar from like a skill set and from a size and thing like that. So yeah, I think it's unfortunate, but I think at this point, like I asked it on Twitter the other day as far as if Sam Steele became Andrew Cogliano, and for me that's the one I think that makes the most sense as far as a projection, because Cogliano was drafted as a center by Edmonton to be a number 2 center to provide some depth, and he ended up getting moved to the wing, and then he got traded to Anaheim, and it completely changed, I think, the trajectory of his career. And I think Sam Steele has a lot of similarities, maybe a little bit more offense than defense, but that's not a bad thing for Cogliano. So even if he turns into Andrew Cogliano, I think that's great, but I get that a large portion of the fan base is going to be frustrated if that's all he becomes, quote unquote.
Yeah, and as much as face-off wins are overvalued, it's still not a bad thing to have a guy on the wing, just like Andrew Cogliano was, who could step into the face-off dot and 56, 57% of the time win you a draw, and is reliable and is going to step in there. He's not going to be a typical winger who steps in and likely is going to lose the draw, right? So it face-offs don't have a huge impact on the game, but it is still nice to have that option as a winger, a second winger on a penalty kill, where you've got your main center who goes in, and then if he gets thrown out, you've got Sam Steele who could come in and still do the job and win a face-off. And especially if it's in your defensive zone and you're in a penalty kill and in a playoff game or in a late in the game and an important draw, those are where you like to have those guys who could step in. So I'd like to see him on the wing at some point. I think he eventually gets forced onto the wing whenever we see Zegras obviously permanently at center now, and Isaac Lindstrom looks like he's going to stay at center once some of the other prospects kind of move in. And if the Ducks draft a center this year, I think eventually if Sam Steele is going to be a part of this organization, it's probably going to be on the wing. And I would love to see how his game translates to playing on the wing. I think he has a skill set that actually would do pretty well where without the main defensive responsibilities he's tasked with right now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is, right? Is you take a little bit of that defensive responsibility away, but you take someone who is capable defensively, and it allows them to excel because they're not as, they're not as crucial, so they can kind of improvise a little bit more and use their skating and their hockey IQ to kind of jump plays here and there. But so I wanted to ask you this. If you had to say right now, which one do you think Sam Steele is more likely to become, Cogliano or Henrique?
I would say probably Cogliano. I think it's somewhere eventually in the middle. and I don't know if it's with the Ducks. Just based off Aiken's comments, I feel like they still think he's going to be a center, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they like, the defensive side of the game that he has, and the fact that he wins draws, and they value that still highly. Maybe they shouldn't put up as much importance on it as they do, but it's no secret that they value that, and they like to have guys who can be out there and win 56% of their draws. And why Getzlaf and Henrique and Sam Steele are usually the centers for the Ducks when everybody's fully healthy. Now maybe that's changing with Trevor Zegras moving to the middle of the ice, and we'll see how that goes. But I think it's eventually somewhere in the middle. But if he's with the Ducks, I think he's going to be a center. So maybe if he wants to transition to the wing, and if that's eventually where his career takes off, similar to, like you said, with Andrew Cogliano when he moved from Edmonton to Anaheim, then maybe we see a bit more production from him, a bit more freedom for him to flourish offensively, where he can't really do that as a centerman. I think honestly, if I had to sit here and say where do I think his best position is for him to really utilize his skill set, I think it's on the wing.
Yeah, I agree.
But we'll see. I mean, I can't honestly see that being with Anaheim. It's sad to say. I just don't know where he gets in on the wing, right? Like when you look at the wingers the Ducks have already and the wingers they have coming up, I don't see him getting that opportunity. I mean, he's had it before, but now with all the other wingers that they have coming, I can't see him getting another shot on the wing. I think they are pretty dead set on him playing center if he's playing for the Ducks.
Yeah, it's almost like the opposite of that, that cliche that, you don't become CEO at the place you worked in the mailroom, right? Like, they don't hire from the mailroom because they saw you at, your least interesting or appealing, theoretically. So if you go to an outside company, then what they're going to see is the candidate that you are and have become, and yada, 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 and then you go there. And it's kind of the exact opposite with Sam Steele, where it's no, he was a first-round center that we drafted. And, I do think that he could have a nice, long career as a potential second, third-line tweener winger. But I am afraid, like you're saying, of the idea of Anaheim never seeing him as anything more than a center and either dropping him down to the fourth or moving on a little early. So
yeah, I mean, when he was coming up, I never thought he would be a center and adapt well to the defensive side of the game, be a guy who wins faceoffs. And to his credit, he's proven me wrong, but maybe for the detriment of him actually succeeding in this Ducks lineup is that I can't say for sure until we actually see him on the wing for a decent sample size of games, but he just does have that skill set that you think would be better served as a winger, where he can kind of do some more things offensively and be a bit more creative, because he has the ability to do that. But when you've stuck him at center and he has a little bit more responsibility, he's not a Trevor Zegras where he'll do it no matter what. He's got game-breaking ability on every play. He needs a bit more space and a bit more time to do those things where he can actually excel. And he can only do that on the wing. He can't do that at center. So if you want him at center, then he's going to have to be that matchup checking center. That's the only way I think he succeeds as a center, and then that's likely as a third line kind of penalty killing center. Whereas if he's on the wing, I think, like you said, he could be that middle six guy who can slide up and down the lineup as a second line winger or a third line winger and just contribute and be, that kind of potential 20 goal guy, 40-point guy on the wing.
Yeah, he's got a tough road ahead of him. I think, I think there's going to need to be a lot of questions asked and answered about who, even out of the young Ducks, is going to be a part of this team going forward and for how long. Especially with the contracts for Henrique and Silverberg being what they are, and Raquel and Manson are a year away from UFA, and Lindholm is 2 years away. There are going to have to be some decisions made very quickly about who is and isn't a part of this team. And I think either whether it's with Seattle or, a quote-unquote hockey trade, I think there's a very good chance that by the end of next year, Sam Steele's in a different jersey.
If Sam Steele goes to Seattle and flourishes as a William Karlsson type move, puts up 40 goals with the Seattle Kraken, I'm going to be upset.
But isn't that almost perfect, right? If he goes there, he has the one crazy season like William Karlsson had, and then he turns into a perfectly decent second-line center.
Yeah, I mean, he has that potential.
What William Karlsson is. William Karlsson is not, a 50-goal scorer like he was that first year. He's just not that guy. Now, it's dope as hell that he did it, and I'm not mad at him. But, like you said, the sample size is big enough now to say that was the outlier.
Yeah.
So, if Sam Steele goes and has one big pop in Seattle and then just is kind of fine for the rest of forever, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to hold any animosity for Seattle right off the jump.
Yeah, and I think Sam Steele, his game is fairly similar to William Karlsson. Not to say that he's going to go off and do the same thing, but if he was to go to a team like Seattle and get a new start, I think there's potential for him to maybe not have that type of year, but a breakout year for sure. One guy we got to talk about, because it's the guy who's going to be here for a while, is Cam Fowler, and apparently he only scores beautiful goals against the Kings now, because his last two goals were fairly similar. This one was nicer than the last one, but he likes that kind of skate to the top of the top of the opposition zone, cut in and toe drag, and then snipe one top corner. So I mean, this was beautiful.
It's weird.
But
it's weird how a guy who should be playing wing does better below the dots offensively. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, Athanasiou is going to be watching that one back after this game, because Cam Fowler put that right between his legs. Like that was. If you took the number off, I would be betting money that was Zegras who pulled that off.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you just said this is a thing that happens tonight, who does it? Yeah. No, you wouldn't guess Cam. You'd guess Drysdale before you'd guess Cam.
Yeah.
Hell, I think I'd guess Troy Terry before I guessed Cam. But, it was an incredible play. I don't know, what you saw right there was the promise that was made a decade ago with him, which is this dude who has incredible puck skills and is an insanely gifted skater, uses both of those things to be an impactful top four defenseman with, the ability to score goals and things like that. And that's what he was for a play. It's exactly what he was. It was beautiful. He made two great moves. He made them smoothly. He had a patience and confidence in it. But there are other times where he, is supposed to be guarding the front of the net and he's over in the corner because he just got pushed all the way over there. I don't know.
It's almost like if he was making $2.3 million less, it wouldn't be a problem. We'd be sitting here saying, wow, Cam Fowler's a great player and he's only making $4 million. And, he has his warts, but he's only making $4 million. And then he can pull off plays like this.
Let me tell you what his biggest issue is, and I'm not even being funny. It's that him and Josh Manson doesn't work as a pair. It's the dumbest thing in the world because on paper it's perfect, and every time they play together they both look terrible. If that pairing worked, I don't think Cam Fowler's contract looks as bad because you have the perfect pair, right? You have that hard-nosed defenseman and that smooth skating, freewheeling offensive guy. But what you end up with more often than not is Cam Fowler on a line with someone who doesn't play defense or isn't very good. And so when he makes mistakes, stand out, and he's put in a position to carry guys in a way that I don't think he's capable of. But goddamn, that was a sweet play tonight. So, it's just so funny. Like, I literally just made a joke about him, and then he does that. It's beautiful.
I don't want to get into it because I feel like I could get into a 2-hour discussion about Cam Fowler here, but I gotta ask one question about it before we move on from him. Is it saying something that we have never found like a right guy to play with Cam Fowler? Like, there's never been a guy who would be like, oh yeah, like this is it, and they're going to be together for a while. Like, it's never happened for him. Is that him, or is that the Ducks' inability of actually putting a quality defender with him?
I don't know, because you know what I honestly, I do think he was fine with Lovejoy. I think him and Despres would have been a great pair and should have been a pair together. And Despres just got injured. So I think it very much speaks to his limitations and the way he has been misjudged by the organization. But I don't know that it's his fault. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's his fault either. I mean, he ultimately doesn't get to pick who he plays with, and it's up to the organization to evaluate his skill set and go out and find the right guy to go and play with him. They just haven't done that. They have, like you said, Lovejoy's worked, and somebody mentioned, I think Boschman played with him, and Dupre worked with him at times.
Is that how you say that, Dupre?
Yes, I knew you were gonna get grilled for that one. It's much
That's fine.
that much maybe worse
care.
than Drysdale.
I don't speak French Canadian. I don't give a shit. I just didn't know how to say it. Dupree. Okay. Simone Dupree. Anyways, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, but yeah, I mean, I don't think it's his fault. It's definitely on the organization that they haven't found the guy to play with him. But he has this ability, right, where he can be the guy we thought he would be. It's just it doesn't happen all the time. Where if he was kind of like in the future, like let's say it's Luke Hughes and Jamie Drysdale in the future, and if you had Cam and he was making $2 million less and he was your second your lefty on your team, it's not the worst guy to have. Like, he has value when you have other guys who can do the other things that he can't. And if you put him with the right guy, which they haven't done much throughout Cam's career, he could be a really valuable guy. But the problem is he makes a ton of money. His contract is for like the next 4 or 5 years, and they routinely play him with whoever's left. You know, he how many partners does he have this year? 7, 8?
I think he's played with everybody but Getzlaf.
Yeah, he's played with Shattenkirk. He's now played with Larson. He's played with Walensky. I think like
Mahura.
Yeah, maybe the only guy is Jamie Drysdale that he hasn't played with, and I guess Hampus Lindholm.
Yeah. So, yeah, we might just have to do a whole deep dive into Cam, because I can talk about this for 2 hours because I have so many thoughts and questions about him.
Yeah, we can't stick it on for long, but one guy we do have to talk about, because I know you wanted to talk about, as another Ducks defenseman, is Josh Mahura, and I mean, I'll just kind of turn it over to you here in terms of kind of what spurred. We've talked about him in a bunch of different ways this year, but what specifically did you want to get into with Josh here?
So I have noticed that people are very scared of losing Josh Mahura in the upcoming expansion draft. And people are very scared of him pulling exactly the same shit that Shea Theodore is, right? Which is where he ends up on this expansion team. He's given a bigger role, bigger minutes, and he turns into this, Norris Buzz earning #1 defenseman. And yeah, man, that would suck because, they drafted both of those guys. But I want to know how high, is that legitimately what everybody thinks his ceiling is? Because I don't know that Mahura ends up even being better on an impact level than Cam Fowler, who I shit on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think if you remove the whole Shea Theodore situation, we're not having this discussion. But it's like PTSD to, we lost this young left-handed defenseman drafted from the WHL to an expansion team, and he's gone off and blown up. And we could do it again. We could lose another young left-handed defenseman who's looked pretty good, who's looked good in the AHL, for nothing. He's going to go to expansion team. It's going to be the same thing. Can he be as good as Shea Theodore? I mean, we don't know. Maybe. It's a long shot for sure. But we just don't know what he is. When he's played in the NHL, he's looked good. But for Shea Theodore, the difference was you couldn't send him down, right? When Shea was on his game, he got into a very competitive Ducks blue line and stuck around. there's something to be said. As much as I love Josh Mahura, the fact that, and I don't know what's going into it, whether it's they don't want to show him off or whatever, the fact that he hasn't gotten into a lineup that's had Andy Belinsky, that's now had Simon Benoit make his NHL debut, that's had Jakob Larsson all year, it says something about what the organization feels they have in Josh Mahura and what they felt they had in Shea Theodore.
And so that's my thing, right? Because you said, and I'm not like attacking you, but like you made the comment. You're like, Mahura has looked good. I don't know that he's looked good. I think he's looked fine, and I think that there is a difference. If he came, Jamie Drysdale, for everybody, so they don't yell at me. Jamie Drysdale walked in and looked good. Mahura has at times looked like someone who's not ready to play in the NHL, and at other times has looked like a guy who is capable of playing in the NHL. Again, the same thing with Theodore, and, Christo mentioned it in the chat, like, Theodore looked good when he came to the NHL. He at times did not look ready, but that's a different thing. You could see that he was a step above players like Larson or Mahura or any of these guys. And so I just think, like I've made fans for it before, but like I do think they managed to turn everything into a referendum on the Shea Theodore trade. And it's like at a certain point we like have to move on. Like as a group, we need to eat our ice cream, watch our movies, cry all day, and move on. It's really bad. Because if, like I don't think losing Josh Mahura is in any way the worst outcome at the expansion draft. I think it's unfortunate, but I don't think it's the worst. And I think the fact that they traded for Hayden Fleury, to your point, does say that I think they think there are limitations on what Mahura can be at the NHL level.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think when I think he's looked good in the sense that you have to compare him to who he's looking good to, right? He's looking good in comparison to Jakob Larsson and Andy Belinsky and Kevin Shattenkirk, right? Whereas Shea Theodore came in and was looking good in a Ducks blue line that was considered one of the best young blue lines in the entire National Hockey League, and he looked good. Now, I will defend the fact that there are several parallels to the development of Josh Mahura and Shea Theodore. Shea Theodore I don't want to say he dominated the AHL when he first got there. Slowly adjusted, was about half a point per game in his first couple seasons, slowly got up to it, and then he was a point per game, and then he started making his chances in the NHL. Had a season where he played like 19 games, which is fairly similar to when Josh played 17. I think Shea had 9 points, Josh had 5, and then now Mahura is back down in the AHL. He's almost at a point per game. Shea Theodore went down, was around the same thing, and then Shea got moved to Vegas in the expansion draft, and then his first season in Vegas wasn't that great. I think he had 30 points in 69 games, and then slowly picked it up, and now he's almost a point per game this year. So there are some parallels, so I can understand the concern, but Josh Mahura is not Shea Theodore, and he's not, and not saying like it's obvious he's not Shea Theodore now, but he's not Shea Theodore at the same point in their development. Like he's not where Shea Theodore was at when Shea Theodore was 22 years old in the Ducks organization. He's just not at that point. And I believe Shea was also getting it done as a 20 and 21-year-old with the Ducks, whereas Josh has kind of had 3 stints now with the Ducks, and it's been kind of the same, 4 points in 11 games, 3 points in 11 games this year, 5 and 17. He's come in, he's done a job, he's looked good, but defensively he hasn't gotten it done. And sometimes he's just kind of not looked engaged in the play. So I mean, like I would still hate to lose him for nothing, but it's not the end of the world if we do. It's not the same situation.
Well, never mind. We'll have this conversation another time.
We're gonna have an expansion draft show that's coming out closer to.
It's just we'll move on. But yeah, I don't want Mahura to go, but there are only so many spots, and I think you can speak to this. The team is in a pretty good spot in the pipeline right now as far as having guys who can be potentially capable, middle pair NHL defensemen. Um, you know, of both hands, frankly, or even I think there's a couple of lefties that play on their off wing, anyways. So I just think it's not the worst outcome to lose Mahura, and I do think a lot of people are confusing, like you said, what are similarities in some of the context to being the exact same situation, and it's just not.
Yeah.
The teams are in a complete, like Anaheim is in a completely different place now than they were then. Like that's the other thing to remember. The issue is that he didn't quite fit what they thought their timeline was. And so they were like, all right, we're going to move him, keep our guys, and we're going to have this core for the next. And then that just didn't happen, and some of that core didn't develop the way they wanted it to. That's all stuff that is certainly worth pointing out and holding the organization accountable to. But that's not the case right now. I don't think any of these defensemen that aren't named Jamie are indispensable. As much as I love Hampus Lindholm, I do think you could put an offer in front of me that I would say yes to. I just don't think the context is the situation is so similar that Anaheim is going to end up making a move that they regret.
Yeah.
As much as people seem to think.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, the Ducks have some good young defensemen on the way who, projection-wise, are similar to what Josh Mahura could become at his best. When you look at Jackson Lacombe, good year this year, improved, looked great. Henry Thrun, great year this year, improved on his game, looked great. Ian Moore, same thing. And if the Ducks draft Luke Hughes or Simon Edvinsson or Brant Clark, we won't even be talking about, even if Josh Mahura goes, we won't even be talking about losing Josh Mahura because now they've brought in, a top-end defenseman to go along with Jamie Drysdale. So, and like Chris said in the chat, if, losing Mahura means we save a good young forward from getting selected, it is what it is. And you brought in Hayden Fleury, which ultimately could replace what Josh Mahura brings. And Hayden Fleury's playing in the NHL. He's playing right now. And Josh Mahura is in the AHL. So it is what it is if they select him. I think Seattle will go somewhere else. I think they'll take somebody who they think is a bit more NHL ready, but it all depends, I think, on who else they select from other teams. And if they feel like they want a good young NHL defenseman who could crack the lineup, maybe Mahura goes. But it's not the end of the world at the end of the day. But somehow we got through this entire show, and we didn't really touch a lot on Trevor Zegras' return to the lineup. Like, that was supposed to be the headliner of this show. So I feel like we should spend at least 5 minutes before we get to the final topic of the show here to slightly touching on Trevor Zegras' return to the lineup in his first NHL game at center, because he didn't look out of place. He looked exactly the same when he was up before. The defensive side of the game didn't look like it was a burden to him. He was hard on the forecheck. He got back quickly to his own end. He looked great. And when you look at the numbers tonight, he was the Ducks' most dangerous forward when it comes to expected goals for percentage. The Ducks' best line was Terry, Zegras, and Comtois. This is, other than him putting up a point or scoring a goal, this is all you could ask for his return to the lineup. And it's coming off of just exceptional play in San Diego, where he had 12 points in 9 games. So it's nothing, we're not shocked. We all knew when Zegras came back he was going to look good, because he looked good when he got sent back down. As much as they want to say this is transition to center, and maybe part of that's true, a lot of it was to make sure he didn't lose that extra year off his unrestricted free agent status, and it would be 8 years instead of 7 years. So it's no surprise that he comes back in and looks great.
Yeah, no, I think, when he got sent down, everybody kind of understood that it wasn't a move that was clearly needed. It was a decision the organization was making, right? And that's fine. I get that. I don't think he needed to go down, but they did it. I get why they did it, and I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I do think you could make the argument that he has shown enough skill that it was worth just giving him his shot. But again, I don't think you did anybody any harm by taking off, 2 or 3 weeks and being like, yeah, just go play in Irvine for a little bit. So, yeah, he looked fine. He looked good. I think a little bit early, there were times where he looked a little bit out of place as far as kind of running around chasing the puck in his own end, but overall he was fine, and he was being creative and impactful, and he was using his skating and his stick handling and just trying to create. That's what he's going to be doing.
Yeah, it's gonna take some time to just get adjusted to the NHL game again, right? He's been down in the AHL for 9 games, and in a lot of those games he looked bored. Like, he just was casually going about his business in the American Hockey League and torching it at the same time. So getting back up to speed is going to take a couple of games for him, and the fact that he looked so good in his first game back just bodes well for the last 6 games of the season here. And I hope they, like we said earlier, I hope they keep this line together. I think eventually the points are going to come for these guys. And what a great way to end what is a disappointing season than to have your top prospect look great and hopefully put some points on the board, right? And that's all we could really ask for. I mean, Jamie Drysdale's looked excellent, had a great game today. Trevor Zegras had a great game. Watching them for the last 6 games here and, end the season on a high and push into next year, I think is all we can really ask for.
Yeah, no, exactly. At this point, it's all just about the little things that are going to get us into draft season and the off season, and seeing what comes of all of that. So at this point, it really is just looking at Trevor Zegras and seeing what he can do, and hoping he does something stupid, wild in the last handful of games, and we get lucky and get something to be excited about. But
yeah, we need to see
he's
lacrosse.
He's going to be an NHL center. Yeah, he's going to be an NHL center, and at this point, it looks like he is certainly more than capable of becoming a number 1 center in the NHL.
Don't tell Pat that, though.
He has to get there. He has to get there, but it does look like he's got a good shot.
I know Pat's listening to this right now, and he still thinks Trevor Zegras is a middle 6 center in the NHL. Or a middle 6 winger, sorry.
Yeah.
All right, before we wrap here, you started a movement today, whether you wanted to or not, of Phil Kessel coming to the Anaheim Ducks. For Adam Henrique and a 3rd-round pick, I think is the trade you picked. But the return is meaningless in this deal. Maybe not, but why Phil Kessel? Where did this come from?
So, I was just kicking dumb stuff around, and I was just trying to especially late in the year, one of the things I like, because I'm a loser, guys, it is what it is, is I'll look at the draft lottery and look at teams, 10 through 20 and try to see who's in that range, that Anaheim could be targeting to look to for things. And all of a sudden I went and looked at the Arizona cap friendly, and I was like, damn, Phil Kessel only has 1 more year left and he makes 6-8. And I was like, they don't really have a center. They don't even have Derek Stepan anymore at this point. And I was like, maybe they could use that. And Phil Kessel's cool, man. He's awesome. He's unintentionally funny. And for me, the other thing is he perfectly fits with what this team needs, which is a small shot in the arm that lifts the goal-scoring ability of the team to a point where you can see them being more competitive. But there's nothing about this that is a commitment to the future that puts the team at risk. More likely than not, what in this scenario, what happens is they trade for him, they play him, he plays 30 games, they have a conversation. Do you want to stick around, or do you want to go to free agency? He says what he says, they figure it out. Either he signs the extension and everybody's happy, and then everybody freaks out. But more likely than not, they get to the trade deadline and they move him. They get a decent pick maybe, and he goes on and he plays in the playoffs and he does whatever he does. And then you know what happens? We don't have Adam Henrique on the cap anymore, which is awesome, because even if Sam Steele becomes a winger, Anaheim is still going to have the opportunity to, one, draft more guys, but two, sign guys or make trades. Adam Henrique doesn't give the team anything in the short term that it needs, and it doesn't cost anything in the long term that you want. So I just feel like moving on from Adam Henrique is a great idea, and I like Phil Kessel. He scores goals, and he doesn't miss games. And I think those are, I mean, honestly, like the two biggest things that hurts Anaheim on a regular basis is they can't score goals and they're never healthy. So yeah, I'll take the chubby American who's super fast and scores goals.
I don't know about
That just
super
sounds like a
fast
blast.
anymore, but he did score tonight for Arizona. And you know what? When you first brought this up in our group chat earlier, I said, like, what are you thinking? Like, this is stupid. I will admit I have sat down and thought about it a little bit more. And looking at the fact he has 18 goals on the Arizona Coyotes this year, I can't argue that he wouldn't also have 18 or more on the Ducks, right? Like, I don't see how the Arizona Coyotes are that much more skilled, that the Ducks don't have players that can get him the puck and he could be the main guy on the power play. I think he would still have 18 or more with Anaheim in the same amount of games played this year. And yeah, you know, you're replacing Adam Henrique, who has 11, but the Ducks' top goal scorer is Comtois. He only has 13. The Ducks only have two players who scored more than 10. Bringing in a guy like Phil Kessel, as much as it is just for fun for now and to add a little bit more goals to a bad team, it you know, if it costs a third-round pick to get out of a last year of a bad contract, and then you can potentially move Phil Kessel at, you know, 50% retained. He's only making, you know, 3 closer to the deadline. That's likely 2 as a cap hit. And if he, you know, scores 10, 12 goals in 30 games heading up to the deadline or more, it's a pretty valuable asset to move. And, you know, his history as a Stanley Cup winner is going to do well for the...
as the rightful winner of a Conn Smythe that was taken from him. But sure, we'll go with that for now.
He's going to be popular among some of the old school GMs for his leadership and his history as a...
He might be the one guy that won't get the benefit of the doubt there, hilariously enough.
He might, yeah.
But the other thing I think that's also worth mentioning is I don't know that it's the worst idea in the world to bring in a veteran goal scorer, a guy who has consistently scored 20 goals in this league, to bring him in to have around Zegras and give Zegras a guy who could put the puck away for sure, but also like Jacob Perreault, Braden Tracy, Maxime Comtois, Sam Colangelo. You have these young guys who you're hoping can be productive goal-scoring forwards, bringing, again, a guy like Phil who has been there, done that, has gone through the ups and downs. He's played on bad teams. He's played in the playoffs. He's won a cup. Having him around to help provide that mentorship for these young goal scorers and help them kind of deal with the emotional and mental parts of being a goal scorer, I think that has a lot of value. And to be honest, if he comes back on a cheap contract, like, who doesn't want Phil Kessel around forever?
It's such a nice and funny thought to think of Trevor Zegras' first full career, or first full season in his NHL career would be playing with Phil Kessel on his wing.
Dude,
it's priceless.
No bullshit. Are you telling me right now that if I told you it was they gave up Sam Steele and a third in that trade, but Phil Kessel wins the Rocket Richard as a Duck next year, it's 100 worth it. It's worth it 100 times out of 100.
Yeah, I mean, that would mean he'd have to somehow outscore Austin Matthews, so he's likely scoring 50 or 60 goals, which I don't think is happening.
Wait, who did you just say?
Austin Matthews?
He's American, right? Is it weird that the two best goal scorers in the history of the world are American? I think that's weird.
We're going off the rails with Phil here. But, I mean, like, ultimately, if it was Henrique and you do a sweetener because Henrique has an extra year in his contract to get out from that extra year and it brings in Phil, I would argue Phil fits better for the Ducks than Henrique does at this point in time, especially if you think Sam Steele, or if the organization thinks Sam Steele is still going to be a center. You don't really need Adam Henrique. He's been playing on the wing. Why not go get an actual winger and one who can score? Because the Ducks don't really have many of them.
They don't.
Phil's age and whatever his history is kind of irrelevant to that situation. I think the Ducks' main focus in free agency this year is likely to go out and get a veteran winger who can score. Like, that's going to be one of the things I think they actually bring in. Why not get out from a bad contract? You're bringing in another one. It's a bit shorter, and you get that.
No.
That one in.
It's 2 years shorter. Phil Kessel is a UFA next summer.
Mm-hmm.
After this year, Henrique still has 3 more years.
How much older is Phil than?
He's 33, so he's
2 years older.
about 3 years older. 3 years older, yeah.
So, I mean, I think you could get away with just a third, just to get out from under 2 years. Phil will be 34 by the time next season begins.
Yeah, I think the thing here, right, is you have to ask yourself, like, what is the best fit for Adam Henrique? The best fit for Adam Henrique is a team that he can come in and be a role-filling centerman. So you need a team that's kind of in a contending place. The problem with Arizona there is they're not. They suck. But they also don't have anything else. And if you give them a pick, I'm pretty sure they'll do just about anything right now. So I just think, Adam Henrique goes to a team where he can be useful and fill a role that is a little bit better. I think Minnesota is a great place for Henrique, but they don't have Phil Kessel, so Arizona it is.
It's crazy how we're 2 years removed from Phil Kessel having 82 points in 82 games, and 3 years removed from him having 34 goals and 92 points. I know it was with the Penguins, and he's playing with Evgeny Malkin, but still.
But still, you're on his hockey reference?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the fact. He's 1 point away from 900.
37 goals. He had 37 goals in Toronto under Randy Carlyle on a team that the 2 best centers were Tyler Bozak and like a 23-year-old Nazem Kadri. This dude does not get the credit he deserves as a legitimate goal scorer. And it's because he's a walking meme. And I get it, it's very funny. But he's a legit, again, he has not missed a game in 10 years. And he has scored 20 goals in every season but his first year and last year, which got cut short.
He'll finish this season. He'll pass 900 points. He's 1 away. After his goal tonight, he's at 899. He'll finish his career with over 400 goals. He might get to 1,000 points. It's maybe a bit of a stretch, but if he plays 2 or 3 more seasons, he'll hit it. He can get 100 points in 3 seasons. He doesn't get enough credit, I think. When we look at other guys who just hit 1,000 or are getting close to 1,000, Getzlaf, right? Like Getzlaf, Kopitar, Corey Perry, Backstrom. Like, Phil's production is up there with those guys, but yeah, he's a meme, right? Like, he does not look like he plays hockey. He looks like he's overweight and he's not an athlete. But I mean, the numbers don't lie. Even this year, man.
He looks like a beer league goalie. Just say it. He looks like a beer league goalie. He looks like a beer league goalie who has like a 1993 Toyota pickup truck, and they always have beer in the back. And God bless him for that. I love it because I grew up around those guys, and those guys are funny.
He looks like a pitcher who's probably 38, 39, put on the pounds, and he comes in for relief in 1 or 2 innings and gives up like 7 runs. He kind of looks like that guy. He's just kind of sticking around the dugout right now because he's got some experience to him. Like, that's kind of what he looks like. But I mean, God, he's got 38 points in 50 games this year. It's not bad.
Phil Kessel looks like a guy who's worked at a gas station for 5 years.
D.B. Lowry said the NHL's Bartolo Colon.
That's a great one. Oh,
we could talk about Phil forever, but I mean, I hope we've at least convinced you that Phil Kessel coming to Anaheim isn't the worst thing in the world.
That's my thing, right? 1, it's a fun and silly idea, but 2, what the hell else do you people have to do right now? Have some fun. Think about how interesting we could be next year with Phil Kessel on the team.
We need some sort of excitement, and if it means Phil playing with Trevor Zegras and them just clicking at an unbelievable level, would just be amazing. It would just be great. Even if the Ducks are going to be bad next year, let's not let's not
Oh, yeah,
kid
no,
ourselves.
they're
Like,
gonna be back.
Phil's not coming in and leading us to the promised land. But Phil Kessel scoring 25 goals on Trevor Zegras' wing would be fun to watch. Like, it would be a fun story to cover.
Okay, wait a minute. Which would be funnier? Let's say that Phil Kessel comes in this summer in that trade, the Henrique trade. Getzlaf comes back for one more year. Phil Kessel puts up 50 goals playing with a rejuvenated Getzlaf, and Getzlaf wins the Hart because they won't give it to Phil. And so Getzlaf wins his only Hart playing with Phil Kessel. Or Getzlaf retires and Phil scores 50 goals and Phil wins the Hart.
What a
Which one
swan
is funnier?
song. I think Phil just winning the Hart is hilarious. In any instance,
need this.
it's
I
just
need this.
amazing.
I need this so bad.
Just making
Your
it
Bob Murray
impossible for
trade.
them not to give it to him. Like, the
Kessel.
Ducks squeak into the playoffs, and Phil has like 50 plus 30, has 80 points.
It's like the Taylor Hall season.
Yeah. I mean, so,
But
McDavid will have
30
140 points, but the fact that that Kessel scored 50 and got the Ducks to the playoffs gets him the Hart.
That's awesome.
God, I can just imagine a 34-year-old Phil Kessel walking up to the Vegas award show and holding the Hart trophy while McDavid and Matthews watch from the crowd
Oh, God, that would rock.
as
That
they
would
walk
be
off with
so-
the Art Ross and the Maurice Rocket Richard trophy.
Dude, he would
Matthews
look
still
like a
scores
ch-
55 goals, but Kessel gets the Hart.
He would look like, if that happened in Vegas, he would look like a street magician who just wandered in off stage and on stage. Incredible.
He's a busker off the street.
That's that's what we should do for a Pucks and Brews, is just do Phil Kessel looks like for an hour and a half.
He's got a heart. Yeah, DB Lowry says he's got a heart in one hand and a hot dog in the other. Walks up on stage with just a big mustard stain on his shirt.
No, dude, he fucking pulls up to the NHL awards in the Oscar Mayer wiener truck.
Just right on stage. He hops out the back and a bunch of hot dogs spill at the back of the truck.
Oh, exactly.
All right, we got to wrap this up because Pat's a old man screaming at us right now that he has to go to bed. So,
Shut up, old man.
but if you guys did not see the draft preview show that Stephen and I recorded with Josh Bell, make sure you check that out. It's the only look we're gonna get at the draft until probably middle of June, right? A week or two out from the draft, and we'll kind of revisit that and look at some of the updated standings with some of the tournaments and everything going on. So if you're wondering, I know we have these questions kind of come up almost every show, every day on Twitter, like who's the top guys in this draft, who's the guy the Ducks could look at. That is an evergreen show that you can go back to until we record another. That Josh goes into, I think, what was like the top 8 guys in this draft.
Yeah.
We kind of broke down all of them, how they could fit with Anaheim, what their skill set is. So it's a great show, and Josh knows a ton more than both of us combined about these guys, and he's been watching them all year long. So make sure if you're looking for not only a show about the draft, but with a Ducks focus on who they could get and how they could fit with the team, make sure you go check that one out because it's a good one. And also, we have a Pucks and Brews for any of our Patreon guys. That's coming up hopefully this weekend. If not, we're going to push that out in early May. And if you're new to the show or new to kind of listening to us, Pucks and Brews is our kind of flagship show on Patreon, which is our kind of subscription service. We've got a bunch of people over there who like to support the show, and we give them bonus content. Maybe not as often as we should, but whenever we get the time to get it out, it's always a ton of fun. The guys make fun of me, as they did last show, for apparently not drinking anything or complaining about drinking any alcohol. So it's always a good one. But that will do it for today. What next game is Saturday? So Friday, Saturday, back to back.
Yeah.
So not sure if we're gonna have a show on Saturday. The last couple Saturdays we haven't been able to schedule a show, so we'll keep you guys posted on Twitter. But if not, then we'll see you after the Kings series for the Blues games and the Wild game to wrap up the season. Thanks for everybody who came out live, and we'll talk to you guys later. Take care, guys.
Bye, everybody.